Most people believe that the more you spend on a watch, the better the watch you are getting. And that is not exactly how it works. The gap between a $50 watch and a $50,000 watch is not about how accurately it tells the time. It has everything to do with understanding exactly what your money is buying at each step of the ladder. Let's look at these 7 levels of watches. By the time we reach the top, you will know precisely where your money is genuinely working for you and where you are simply funding a name that someone decided to engrave on a dial. Alright, let's dive into it. Level 1 is where almost every watch owner begins, and it is where most of them stay without ever fully understanding what they are holding. This is the world of fashion watches and entry-level quartz, like the swatch someone gifted me for my 16th birthday. The Daniel Wellington that kept appearing on every Instagram feed 2 years running until you finally bought one. The Casio you grabbed from a display case at the airport because you needed something on your wrist before a trip. These are objects that tell the time and occupy the wrist. Don't get me wrong, these are honestly pretty great watches, but you need to understand what category of object you are dealing with, its status, and the tier it stands in. Movement inside the vast majority of watches at this level costs the brand between $2 and $5 when purchased in bulk. And then, you are basically paying for the strap, the case finish, the logo, the packaging, and the famous actors you saw with it that led you there in the first place. The names that live at level 1 are Timex, Swatch, Casio, MVMT, or for example Seiko. You are spending somewhere between $15 and $100, and what you are holding is a simple accessory that happens to track the hours except the Casio, which I will talk about later. Here is the thing that most people get completely backwards about level 1. The low price does not indicate poor engineering in any technical sense. Quartz movement technology is of course accurate and reliable. A basic quartz caliber keeps time to within 15 seconds per month. So the problem at level 1 is not precision. The problem is that there is nothing inside the watch that earns long-term ownership. These are fundamentally disposable objects, and the industry that produces them is structured to ensure they need replacing. So as I was saying, the exception at level 1 is Casio. And for those of you who have already seen my previous video, you probably know why I'm saying that. The G-Shock and the original F91W operate in an entirely different philosophical category from everything else. At this price tier, they are tools built to function under conditions that would render every other watch at this level inoperable. Special Forces units have carried the F91W on operations because it is dependable, inexpensive enough to replace without a second thought, and does not produce the light reflection that more polished pieces give off. There are G-Shock units from the mid-1980s that are still keeping accurate time today. If you are at level 1 and you want the best possible value, the answer is the Casio that will be running long after every other watch you have ever owned has been thrown away. Also guys, for those who missed out on the last video, make sure to check it out to get the details on what makes this particular watch tick. I'm Swiss and love our watchmaking history, but I do admit the Japanese have made a great product with this one. So next we have level 2. Level 2 is where the category changes entirely. This is where a watch stops being a wrist accessory and becomes an object that is genuinely worth caring about. Seiko sort of enters this level as well, and I would say Orient joins it. The Seiko, specifically the 5 series, the SKX, and the Orient Bambino. These watches carry real mechanical movements with authentic longevity built into them. You are spending somewhere between $70 and $500, and for the first time in this list, you are acquiring something you could legitimately hand to another person in 30 years and feel no embarrassment about doing so. What changes at level 2 is the movement and why the movement matters. Seiko manufactures the majority of their components internally. The NH35 and NH36 calibers that power most entry-level Seikos are not sophisticated by the standards of the upper tiers, but they are accurate enough for daily use, fully serviceable by any competent watchmaker, and engineered to run for decades on nothing more than periodic maintenance. Citizen belongs in this conversation too, specifically the EcoDrive line, which harvests energy from any light source and eliminates the battery entirely. It is a genuinely intelligent solution to a real problem that most watch brands never even acknowledge as a problem worth solving. What the marketing around level 2 will never tell you is that this is actually where the watch enthusiast community lives. Not in the boutiques with the marble countertops and the white gloved sales staff. Right here at the Seiko Presage, the Seiko Turtle, the Orient Star. These are watches that generate real passion in people who have owned pieces at every level of this list and keep finding reasons to come back. And hear me out, guys, a notable mention at this level is the Seiko Presage. Fun fact, also my first purchase. Under $200 gets you a hand-winding movement, visible through the caseback, a dial, executed at a standard that looks like it belongs on a watch costing 5 times as much, and a level of fit and finish that makes brands charging 3 times the price look complacent. If someone tells you they have been collecting watches for a decade and they do not own a Seiko Presage, they are either lying or they sold it and regret it. Level 3 is where the phrase Swiss made begins to carry genuine weight, not because the words are magic, but because the regulation behind them actually enforces something. To legally print Swiss made on a dial, a brand must ensure that at least 60% of the total manufacturing cost occurred in Switzerland. That threshold is not as demanding as the Swiss watch industry's most passionate defenders would have you believe, but it does mean there is a legal and commercial framework holding the product to an identifiable standard. Tissot, Hamilton, Longines, Mido, and Frédéric Constant live at level 3. You are spending between $300 and $2,000. This is the level where beginners consistently make a mistake that costs them money. They assume that entry Swiss is fundamentally about prestige, that you're paying a premium for a label rather than for substance. And for some brands in this tier, that assumption is partially correct, but the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 and the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical are not prestige plays. They are engineering arguments. The Hamilton Khaki Field uses the ETA 2801, a movement from one of the most respected caliber manufacturers on Earth, an engine built to run for 40 years with a service interval of roughly a decade. The finishing and movement quality at the better end of level 3 is something entry Japanese watchmaking at the same price genuinely cannot replicate. The best value in this entire tier is the Longines Hydro Conquest. It competes directly with pieces charging double its retail price, carries genuine Swiss manufacturer credibility, and holds its secondary market value better than almost anything else you can buy in this bracket. That combination is rarer than it sounds. Now on to level 4. Level 4 is enthusiast territory, and this is where the conversation changes in a way that no specification sheet can fully capture. Between $2,000 and $8,000, you are no longer buying a watch that simply functions well. You are buying a watch that has a perspective, a character, a point of view about what watchmaking should be. Tag Heuer, Tudor, Entry Omega, and Grand Seiko occupy this space. The question you are asking is no longer whether the watch works. You already know it works. The question now is what it says about what you value, and that is a more interesting and more personal question entirely. Grand Seiko deserves its own moment here because it is the most significant thing happening in watches at this price tier, and the vast majority of buyers outside the enthusiast community have no idea it exists. Inside the watch community, it is discussed in the same breath as Swiss houses charging 3 to 4 times the price for comparable or inferior quality. The Zaratsu polishing applied to Grand Seiko cases is performed by hand by craftspeople who have spent years acquiring a single skill. I go into detail on this watch in our previous video for those of you who want to know more, but basically, there is no automated process that achieves this result. A person does it, working by eye, to a standard that gets rejected when it falls short. The movement, especially the spring drive caliber, represent a category of engineering that exists nowhere else. The spring drive uses a conventional mainspring for power delivery, but replaces a traditional escapement with an electromagnetic braking mechanism that achieves accuracy to within 1 second per day. What the brands at level 4 will not tell you directly is that a meaningful portion of what you are paying between $2,000 and $8,000 is covering boutique overhead and the accumulated weight of marketing history. Two watches can share the same movement architecture, the same water resistance rating, the same case materials, and one costs 4 times the other because the logo it carries has been embedded in culture through decades of sponsored moments. That is a legitimate thing to spend money on if you want it. Level 5 is where Rolex lives, where Omega operates at its most serious, where IWC, Panerai, and Breitling bring their flagship pieces to market. You are spending between $8,000 and $30,000, and you have stepped across a boundary that most consumers never approach and genuinely do not need to. Something shifts at level 5 that resists being captured in a list of specifications. These watches have a physical presence that you register before you can articulate why. It is not arrogance. It is the same quality that a properly tailored garment has, a sense that every decision made in its creation was made deliberately and with complete confidence. The Rolex Submariner is not the most technically advanced watch available at $12,000. There are pieces at this price with more complicated movements, more elaborate case finishing, more ambitious dialcraft. What the Submariner carries is 70 years of accumulated cultural meaning. It was on the wrists of working divers. It traveled to depths and altitudes and conditions that most objects do not survive. Every Submariner produced today connects back to a design language that has not required fundamental revision since 1953. That continuity is itself an achievement, and it is part of why the Submariner holds its resale value more reliably than almost any other manufactured object in existence. The honest truth about Level 5 is that you do not need to be here to own a great watch. A Grand Seiko from Level 4 will give you more pleasure on the wrist on a daily basis than most things in this tier, but if you are buying the first serious watch you intend to keep for the rest of your life, the Rolex Submariner or the Omega Seamaster Professional is a solid choice. I mean, James Bond wears it. Do I really need to say more? And in my opinion, the strongest value argument at Level 5 belongs to the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meters. The coaxial escapement inside requires servicing at roughly half the frequency of a conventional lever escapement, which means lower total ownership cost over decades. It holds the Master Chronometer certification, the most demanding movement validation in the industry, and it retails at a meaningful discount to the Submariner while conceding very little of what actually matters on the wrist. If you are spending at Level 5 and you are thinking clearly about the long game, the Seamaster is the answer. Now, Level 6 takes us somewhere that requires a different vocabulary entirely. Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, Vacheron Constantin, you are spending between $30,000 and $150,000 and you are not purchasing superior timekeeping. You are purchasing human skill at a level that cannot be mechanized, compressed, or replicated at scale. So in the Patek Philippe Manufacturing Center in Geneva, it takes months for a single watchmaker to assemble and decorating the movement inside the annual calendar. Every jewel is seated individually. The degree of finishing applied to movement components that will never be seen by anyone who does not own a loop represents a commitment to doing things properly that has no rational economic justification. The piece that changed this tier permanently was the Royal Oak. Audemars Piguet released it in 1972 to a market that was not expecting it and did not immediately know what to make of it. Gerald Genta designed the entire watch in a single evening. It was the first high-end timepiece built around an integrated steel bracelet, the first to treat industrial design as a luxury language rather than a compromise. A stainless steel Royal Oak on the secondary market today trades above $30,000. The metal is not the reason. The idea is the reason. The best purchase at Level 6, if you have genuinely arrived at a point where this conversation applies to your life, is A. Long and Son, a German manufacturer operating out of Glashütte. The quality of decoration on a Lange caliber is the finest in the industry, and that is not a debatable claim. Their value retention is serious, and they're standing among collectors who have been around long enough to know the difference is absolute. And finally, guys, Level 7 is no longer the watch market. Level 7 is the art market wearing a watch. At this tier, you find vintage Patek Philippe references with 50-year-old patina on dials that can never be recreated. Complications from independent makers who produce fewer than 20 watches in a year, and pieces from houses that no longer exist whose movements cannot be serviced with original parts because original parts are no longer manufactured anywhere on Earth. F.P. Journe belongs in this conversation. Francois-Paul Journe is a living watchmaker producing everything in his Geneva manufacture by hand in genuinely limited numbers. His watches trade at substantial multiples of their original retail prices, not because of market speculation, but because collectors who have developed the eye to evaluate what they are looking at recognize craft operating at a standard that almost no other living maker can reach. The Patek Philippe 5711, a stainless steel Nautilus, had a retail price of around $7,000 at the time of its discontinuation in 2021. Secondary market prices crossed $100,000 almost immediately. That is because of scarcity, combined with desire that had been accumulating across a generation of buyers who wanted something that was no longer available to want. That is the mechanism at Level 7. It is not about how well the watch works, it is about the irrational, beautiful, completely human dynamic of wanting something that exists in finite numbers and knowing that the wanting itself will never fully resolve. The uncomfortable reality at the very top of this list is that the watches which command the highest prices are usually the ones least suited to being worn. They are too valuable to put at risk on a daily basis, too historically significant to scratch on a doorframe, too important to insure affordably for the kind of life that includes accidentally bumping into things. Like, guys, if I own a Paul Newman Daytona, I probably won't wear it to meetings. Level 7 is wealth preservation through object. It is a legitimate strategy and it has generated serious returns for collectors who understood 30 years ago what they were acquiring. So where does all of this leave you with a decision to make? The genuine sweet spot, the place where quality and value align most honestly, runs from level 2 through level 5. From an entry Seiko through an iconic Swiss piece, roughly $200,000 to $15,000. This is the range where what you spend and what you receive are most closely calibrated to each other. Begin at level 2 or 3 and use those watches to learn what you actually prefer. Whether you respond to the ritual of a hand wound movement, whether dial design matters more to you than complication, whether you need a watch that can handle anything or one that simply looks extraordinary at a dinner table. Answer those questions honestly with a $200 Seiko before you try to answer them with a $12,000 Rolex. Move into level 4 once you know your preferences clearly enough to spend confidently. Reach for level 5 when you know exactly what you want and you are prepared to keep it for the rest of your life. Unless you are seriously building a collection as a financial vehicle, level 7 deserves to be studied and admired and left alone. The same money that buys one piece at level 7 buys 10 exceptional watches at lower levels. 10 watches worn across different occasions, different decades. The best watch you will ever own is the one that is actually on your wrist. So guys, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel if you like this video. Drop a comment down below to let me know what watches and topic you would like to know about next. For now, take care everyone. From the one and only, your Swiss timekeeper.